Hi, welcome to part 2 of Christianity PowerPoint. Let's head right over there. Okay, so after the death of Jesus, his trial, crucifixion, and then resurrection, we take a look at the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament, that book, in order to understand the activities of the disciples and also the letters of Paul in order to understand what happened in the immediate, 50 years after Jesus died. So after he dies, the 12 disciples go into hiding in Jerusalem until the Pentecost, which is when the Holy Spirit comes down and says, hey, you got to go out and spread the word. So similar to what happened in Buddhism after Buddha died and Ananda said, hey, you should take the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and go out and spread the word. The same thing happens here. So the Holy Spirit tells the 12 disciples to go out and spread the word, and they do. So if you look at this map, if here's Jerusalem, right, the various disciples, and Paul actually wasn't one of the original 12, but he's an example of someone who went out and spread the word. Essentially, it's kind of the same locations that the Jews went during their diaspora. North Africa, here's the different churches in Israel and its neighboring countries, and then essentially through Turkey and then Greece and then into Italy, right? Here's Italy. So here's Greece, here's Italy, and then there's a number of areas where they had spread Christianity in Turkey and Asia Minor. All right, so all of these different little Christian communities get started around the Mediterranean. Paul himself, who was from Tarsus, which is up here, manages to go to Ephesus, which is in Turkey. He goes to Corinth, or the Corinthians, and the Colossians and the Galatians. Galatians are in Turkey too. Colossians and Corinthians are here in Greece. And then, of course, Paul writes letters to the Romans, which, of course, would be here in Italy. So we know just from Paul's letters to various Christian communities that he also traversed basically the same trajectory. Okay, so as we know, the Roman policy is that you have to swear allegiance to the emperor, and all of these little Christian communities that are popping up are talking about worshiping Jesus as their Messiah, etc. So these Christian communities, even though they're spreading, they're still under the jurisdiction of the Roman Empire, and they're being persecuted. I mean, they are definitely a minority persecuted religion within the Roman Empire. The religion of the Roman Empire at that point was a pagan religion, polytheistic with many different gods and many different festivals and cults and things like that. And the Roman Empire in general had a whole diverse selection of all these different kinds of religions, because as you can see, the Roman Empire expands all the way around the Mediterranean. So there's going to be religions and cults up here in North Africa that might be very different from, different religions or cults up in Britain or France or any of the other, broader reaches of the Roman Empire. So needless to say, the Roman Empire had a whole variety of different kinds of religions in the empire, but its main policy was utter allegiance to the emperor. So Christians, much like the Jews, were being persecuted. Now, one of the things that the Romans had done, as I had said in Judaism, as a reaction, was in the Jewish wars, when the Romans attempted to eradicate all Jews, and then, according to the Romans, Christians are just Jews, right? And tried to eliminate all of them. And after the Jewish wars, in which the Second Temple was destroyed, the Jews and Christians basically split because they both blame each other for Roman persecution. Okay, so in terms of pre-Constantine, Constantine is a Roman emperor who converted to Christianity. Before Constantine, which was before the 4th century, basically Christianity was a struggling minority religion, one of many religions that had to really struggle to remain, relevant. So even though it was all over the Mediterranean, they had to practice in secrecy, and they kind of didn't know what the other Christian groups were doing. So I would take a look at what Christianity was like before Constantine, then what did Constantine do, and then what was it like after? Because that's definitely going to be a question on the exam. What was Constantine like? What was Christianity like before Constantine? What did he do? What was it like after? So it's a very kind of easy question, and all the information you need is on this PowerPoint. Constantine, when he converts to Christianity, has a dream when Jesus appears to him in the dream and says, "You're going to win the battle tomorrow if you put a cross on your shield," which he does, at which point he converts to Christianity and writes the Edict of Milan, which declares Christianity the formal religion of the Roman Empire. And he still tolerates the idea that there's many different religions in his empire, but Christianity is going to be the main one. So after that, I would take a look at how Christianity changed once it became the main and official religion of the Roman Empire. So it's basically the flip side of what it was like before, when they were, practicing in secrecy and had to hide in these household churches and stuff. Now they have regular churches and they can practice publicly. So make sure you know the kind of before, during, and after. I would look at the Nicene Creed here. If I were you, here's the link. Part of what happened as a reaction to the Edict of Milan and Constantine declaring Christianity the official religion are different councils are formed of all the church leaders in order to make sure they're all on the same page. And a result of these councils, where they would come together and say, "Hey, do we all agree that, X, Y, and Z?" Creeds or personal or statements of faith would come out of these councils, which are basically just declarations of faith, saying, like the Apostles' Creed, "I believe in one God. I believe in the Holy and Apostolic Church." When you say "I believe in," and then you make a statement of faith, that's what those councils came up with. And if you click on here, you should be able to read a little bit more about the Nicene Creed, the statement of faith that came from the Council of Nicaea. All right? So Christianity starts to spread because now it's unencumbered. It's not persecuted or a minority religion. Between the 4th and the 11th centuries, Christianity moves westward and northward. So most of Europe is converted to Christianity, except for some of these like northernmost countries, which had their own Nordic or Germanic religions. They eventually will become Christian, up to the 14th, 15th centuries, but initially it was really just Southern Europe, the Mediterranean countries that basically became Christian. Okay? They also, once they kind of take over the Holy Roman Empire, which is in Southern Europe, they also start kind of pushing back eastward in order to reclaim the Holy Land. As this Roman Christian church started to move eastward, they realized, hey, there's a bunch of Christians over here, in the eastern part of Christendom. And these Eastern Christians were the Eastern Orthodox. These Roman Catholics, who were now moving eastward to kind of reclaim the Holy Land, basically tell the Eastern Orthodox, hey, you kind of have to follow our rules, the one that our Pope is kind of declaring as universal, Christian doctrines. These Eastern churches over here basically say, hey, we've been practicing Christianity on our own for a while. And just because you guys came to Christianity after Constantine and decided that, you would make these statements of faith and say this is what we believe, doesn't necessarily mean that's what we believe. So what happens is there is a split between these Christian churches, which had been practicing Christianity all along, and then the Roman Catholic Church, which became, publicly Christian after Constantine and decided to say, let's make a uniform idea of what Christianity is. So it's kind of like the Western Christians, the Roman Catholics, were trying to tell the Eastern Christians what to believe, but the Eastern Christians had been there even before the Catholics had been around. And Eastern Christendom, or Eastern Orthodox, are very diverse. They're all over. So you notice like Syrian is going to be very different from Armenian, which is going to be very different from Greek Orthodox, which is going to be very different from Russian. So in terms of the Eastern Church, they're kind of all over the place, versus the Roman Catholics, which have their kind of titular head as the Pope, and also a statement of faith of a set kind of uniform set of beliefs. So it becomes separated into two between the Roman Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox, and that's called the Great Schism of 1054. So I would read all of this if I were you, and read about the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic split in the Smith book, okay? So the Great Schism of 1054 is when the two parts divide. There's also an assignment under the module that you should look at too, which is also a description of how this happened. All right, other things that happened between 380 and 1054, you have a lot of missions up into here where most of these countries are converted, and here's the list. And then various councils where they kind of had to hammer out, what are our fundamental beliefs? So anything from the virgin birth to the Annunciation of Mary to the idea that God is fully God and fully human. How is that possible? Is he half and half? So there's a lot of things. What is the import of the crucifixion? Was it just his death, or was it to usher in the Messianic age? So there's all these things they have to figure out and explain so that everyone is on board. So there's a variety of councils where that happens. Now, one threat that is threatening Christianity and the spread comes from here, and we'll learn that, if we learn about Islam, we'll learn that it comes from over here, and that they kind of come up in the 7th century, Islam from Saudi Arabia, and threaten the existence of Christians in the Middle East and in this region later on, starting from the 7th century onwards. Okay, and they'll be a kind of a constant threat to the Christians from the 8th to the 16th centuries. All right, so after 1054 and the split between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics, the Middle Ages in Europe from the 11th to the 15th century is really considered kind of the classical period of Roman Catholicism. And it's when the Catholic Church was extremely powerful. It ebbed and swayed, though, ebb and flowed. Sometimes they were really powerful. Sometimes they had very little power. But overall, pretty much most of the European countries had some sort of hold or some sort of control from the Pope or from the Catholic Church. There was influence in every single one of those countries from the Church. So if you just kind of take a look at, A through G here, those are all examples of the power and the influence of the Catholic Church. One of the kind of side effects of great power and great influence comes great corruption, because if you have all this power, frequently there will be corruption and influence within the church that involves money or who your family is or who the king is and things like that. So there were a lot of political favors, a lot of religious absolution granted here and there. And in particular, there was there appeared to be only the rich seemed to be saved versus the poor who are hungry and poor, and the church wasn't really kind of taking care of that part of the church. So as people began to study and examine the teachings and the structure of the church, they realized there are a lot of flaws. And those people, the people who recognize the flaws and recognize that they love the church and really wanted to fix it, they're called reformers or Protestants. Now, I want to say something very clear, and you better write this down and underline it. Protestants and reformers didn't want to leave the church. They loved the church. They were very, smart scholars who studied the church. They wanted to fix the church. They wanted to fix the institution of the Roman Catholic Church. They recognized the flaws because they were smart and wanted to fix it. That's why they're called reformers. They're not called runawayers. They're called reformers, meaning they wanted to fix it. The problem is the church just didn't want to be fixed. They don't want to lose all these privileges and all these rights and connections and political favors. And as a result, those people who were devout Catholics and wanted to fix the church were essentially kicked out. And that's why they're called Protestants or reformers or the Reformation. The church basically rejected their efforts, and a third branch appears, which is the Protestant branch. So after the Reformation, which is their attempt to fix the church, you have three branches: Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholics, and Protestants. And that's where we'll begin next time.